What if the most important weapon used in the Iran war was not the bomb that exploded underground? What if the real weapon was the belief that, for the first time, a mountain was no longer enough to protect what a country feared losing? On June the United States launched one of the most complex air operations in recent American military history. 14 B-5 Spirit stealth bombers crossed thousands of miles toward Iran. Their target was not an army in the open. It was a problem buried beneath the earth. And that distinction changes everything. Because the object at the center of this story was not simply the B-5. It was the bunker, the hardened underground facility. The idea that a nation could bury something deep enough, reinforce it heavily enough, and surround it with enough defenses that military power would eventually stop at the surface. For years, that idea had shaped Iran's nuclear strategy. Now, it was being tested. And everyone watching could see the obvious part: stealth bombers, bunker-busting weapons, underground nuclear facilities, a massive American strike. But the part most people miss is what happened beneath the headlines. The operation was really a test of whether modern military technology could defeat geography itself. And that question begins inside a mountain, far from Tehran, beneath the rocky terrain of central Iran. The Fordo facility was designed around one simple assumption: depth creates security. The deeper the facility goes, the harder it becomes to destroy. The thicker the rock becomes, the more weapons are required. And eventually, the calculations begin to favor the defender. That is how hardened facilities are supposed to work. They do not need to be invulnerable. They only need to be difficult enough to attack that the attacker begins questioning the price. But Fordo represented a particularly difficult problem. Iran's nuclear infrastructure had evolved over decades through negotiations, sanctions, covert operations, sabotage, and diplomatic pressure. The nuclear deal once offered a path to containment, but as the agreement deteriorated, the strategic calculation changed. Iran's enrichment activities continued to raise international concern. And the closer its nuclear capabilities moved toward weapons potential, the more urgent the problem became for countries that believed a nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Middle East. Yet here was the contradiction. The United States possessed overwhelming military power. But overwhelming power does not automatically mean access. A fighter can dominate the sky and still be unable to destroy a facility buried deep underground. A cruise missile can be extraordinarily accurate and still fail if the target is protected by layers of rock. And an intelligence agency can know exactly where a facility is while still lacking the weapon required to reach it. That was the problem. Finding the target was one challenge, reaching it was another. And that is where the B-5 Spirit entered the story. The B-5 was never designed simply to be another bomber. Its purpose was to solve a different problem. How do you deliver enormous destructive power against a heavily defended target when the defender knows you are coming? The answer was stealth. But stealth alone was never enough. A stealth aircraft can penetrate defenses. It still needs a weapon capable of changing the target once it arrives. That weapon was the Djibouti Massive Ordnance Penetrator. The MOP is enormous. Its scale is difficult to appreciate until you see it beside the aircraft designed to carry it. But its significance is not simply its weight. It is what the weapon is designed to do. It does not behave like a conventional bomb that strikes a surface and detonates immediately. Its purpose is penetration. It is designed to survive impact, drive through hardened material, and detonate after reaching greater depth. And suddenly, the strategic equation changes. The mountain is still there. The concrete is still there. The facility is still underground. But the defender can no longer assume that depth alone guarantees survival. That is the first major contradiction of this story. The bunker was designed to defeat air power. The weapon was designed to make the bunker itself part of the attack. But even that was only half the problem. Because a bunker buster is useless if the aircraft carrying it cannot reach the target. And Iran understood this, Its air defense network was designed to create another layer of protection: long-range surface-to-air missile systems, radar networks, command centers, early warning sensors, fighter aircraft. Each system was supposed to create another barrier between the attacker and the facility. The idea was simple. If you cannot make the bunker impossible to destroy, make the path to it impossible to survive. But here is the problem. Modern air warfare is rarely about one aircraft against one missile battery. It is about systems fighting. Systems: a radar operator sees a signal. Another sensor tries to identify it. A command center decides whether it is real. An electronic warfare aircraft attempts to disrupt the network. A suppression aircraft attacks the radar. A stealth bomber moves through the gaps. And somewhere inside that chain, one side is trying to make the other side uncertain. That is why the operation cannot be understood simply as 14B. Phase flying toward Iran. The visible weapon was the bomb. The invisible weapon was coordination. The strike depended on timing, on intelligence, on electronic warfare, on suppression of enemy air defenses, on navigation, on refueling, on communications, on dozens of decisions made correctly across thousands of miles. The Bifei was the hero, but the Bifei was never fighting alone, and this is where the battlefield becomes larger. Because while the stealth bombers approached their primary targets, other aircraft and support systems were shaping the environment around them. Fighters could provide protection. Electronic warfare aircraft could interfere with enemy sensors and communications. Anti-radiation weapons could threaten radar systems. The objective was not simply to destroy every air defense system in Iran. That would be an entirely different war. The objective was to create enough uncertainty, enough disruption, and enough temporary advantage for the strike package to reach its targets. And that reveals another contradiction. The most sophisticated air defense system in the world does not have to be destroyed to fail. Sometimes it only has to lose the ability to coordinate. A radar that cannot communicate is isolated. A missile battery without reliable targeting information is uncertain. A command center receiving incomplete data is forced to hesitate. And hesitation is dangerous when the aircraft approaching you are designed to be difficult to detect in the first place. This is the part of the operation that disappears when warfare is reduced to explosions on satellite imagery. The strike was not one event. It was a sequence: detect, disrupt, penetrate, deliver. Escape. Every stage depended on the previous one, and every stage created another opportunity for failure. Then there was the geography. The targets were not concentrated in one convenient location. Fordo, Natanz, Esfahan. Different facilities, different functions, different distances, different levels of protection. That matters. Because a nuclear program, it is an ecosystem. Enrichment, research, fuel production, engineering, scientists, industrial infrastructure. The physical sites are only the visible part. Destroying one facility does not necessarily erase the knowledge required to rebuild it. And that creates perhaps the most important contradiction of Part 1. The United States could attack the infrastructure, but could it attack the knowledge? A bomb can collapse a building. It cannot erase an entire scientific community. A crater can destroy machinery. It cannot automatically eliminate the engineers who know how to build the next generation. That distinction would become critical after the strike, because the immediate question was obvious. Did the bombs reach the targets? But the deeper question was waiting underneath. Did the operation destroy the program? Or did it simply change where the program would live? For the moment, the visible battlefield appeared to favor the attacker. Stealth had penetrated. Weapons had reached their targets. Iran's defenses had not prevented the strike. But warfare is rarely decided by the first explosion. The first explosion only changes the next decision. And now Iran had one. It could respond immediately, it could escalate, it could absorb the attack, or it could disappear into the shadows and choose a battlefield where American technology was less dominant. That is where the story begins to move underground. Again, not beneath a mountain, but beneath the surface of the war itself. Because everyone was watching the bombs, everyone was watching the aircraft, everyone was watching the smoke. But the real battlefield was already shifting. And the question was no longer whether the United States could reach Iran's most protected facility. The question was what Iran would do after discovering that the mountain could no longer guarantee protection. Everyone thinks this battle is about bombs and bunkers. But the real battle is about what happens when a country realizes its most expensive defense has become a liability. That is the transformation. The B-Fay and the G-Buffet represented a physical breakthrough, but the strategic consequences extend far beyond the crater. Because once a hardened facility is attacked successfully, every country watching begins asking the same question. What happens to my own underground facilities? And suddenly, the target is no longer just for dough. It is deterrence itself. For decades, military planners have relied on a basic principle. If you cannot prevent an attack, you can make the cost of attacking you unacceptable. Hardened bunkers are built around that principle. Move deeper, build stronger, disperse critical infrastructure, create redundancy, force the enemy to spend more resources than the target is worth. But the B-Fay changes that calculation. Stealth reduces the defender's warning time. The MOP increases the attacker's ability to reach hardened targets. And intelligence allows the attacker to choose exactly where to apply pressure together. Those capabilities create something more important than destruction. They create uncertainty. And uncertainty is often the real weapon. Because now the defender has to ask, did we build deep enough? Did we disperse enough? Did we hide enough? Can our air defenses detect the attacker? Can our radar network survive electronic attack? Can our command system respond quickly enough? The bunker has not disappeared, but confidence in the bunker has changed, and that can be strategically significant. The lesson here is that military power is not only about destroying things, it is about changing what the enemy believes is possible. That is why the consequences of the strike extend beyond Iran. North Korea watches, China watches, Russia watches. Every nation investing in hardened underground command facilities watches. They are not necessarily asking whether the United States can destroy a particular bunker. They are asking something more uncomfortable: how much would it cost to guarantee that the bunker survives, and how much additional money, technology, deception, and redundancy would be required to compensate? The answer could reshape military spending for decades, because every new offensive capability creates a defensive response, and every defensive response creates another offensive adaptation. Stealth produces better sensors produce new electronic warfare. Electronic warfare produces new communication systems. Bunkers produce penetrators. Penetrators produce deeper bunkers. The arms race does not stop. It moves underground. But there is another battlefield energy. Look at the map. The targets sit inside a region that connects nuclear strategy to global energy markets. The Persian Gulf is not an isolated military theater. It is part of the world's economic bloodstream. And the Strait of Hormuz is the narrow point where military decisions can become economic shocks. A missile launched thousands of miles away may seem like a military event, but an attack on shipping can become an energy crisis. An insurance premium can become a political problem. A disruption in oil flows can become inflation. Inflation can become an election issue. And suddenly, a conflict that began with a bunker is affecting consumers who may never have heard of Fordo. That is the invisible battlefield. The bomb destroys infrastructure. The threat changes behavior, and behavior changes markets. This is why Iran's most powerful response may not be another direct missile exchange. A direct missile attack creates a measurable response. It reveals launch locations, it exposes capabilities, it risks interception. It can trigger escalation, but pressure on shipping lanes, regional partners, infrastructure, or vulnerable political systems creates a different calculation. It forces the United States to defend a much larger area, and that creates another contradiction. America may possess overwhelming military superiority, but superiority becomes more expensive when the battlefield expands. One aircraft can destroy a target. It cannot simultaneously protect every base, every ship, every tanker, every partner, every radar site, every airport, every piece of infrastructure across an entire region. This is where geography becomes a weapon. Iran does not need to defeat the United States in a conventional air war to create strategic problems. It only needs to make the cost of maintaining American power rise. That is why the real war is not simply about who wins the next exchange of missiles. It is about endurance, who can sustain pressure longer, who can replace lost equipment, who can maintain alliances, who can keep markets stable, who can absorb political pressure, and perhaps most importantly, who can convince the other side that continuing is no longer worth it. That is the hidden contest beneath the military one. The United States demonstrated that it could penetrate and strike. Iran demonstrated that it still possessed ways to create uncertainty beyond the immediate battlefield. Neither side therefore achieved complete control. The attack changed the balance, but it did not eliminate the problem. And that distinction matters, because destroying physical infrastructure is not the same as eliminating strategic intent. If Iran retains scientists' technical knowledge, industrial capacity, and political motivation, then the program may be damaged without being erased. The question becomes one of time. How long does reconstruction take? How much knowledge survived? How much material survived? How much of the infrastructure was truly destroyed? And where does the next phase of the program emerge? That is why the aftermath may be more important than the strike itself. The bombs were a moment. Reconstruction is a process, and processes are much harder to destroy. There is also a deeper geopolitical consequence. The operation demonstrated that the United States still possesses a unique combination of capabilities: global range stealth, precision weapons, deep penetration munitions, electronic warfare, intelligence, logistics, allied access, and the ability to coordinate them across enormous distances. But the operation also reveals the limits of that power. The United States can destroy a facility. It cannot automatically dictate what happens next. It can penetrate a mountain. It cannot penetrate every political calculation inside the government that built it. It can destroy machinery. It cannot guarantee that the knowledge behind that machinery disappears, and it can create deterrence. But deterrence only works if the other side believes the future cost of escalation is greater than the cost of restraint. That is the paradox. The more successful a strike becomes, the more urgently the defender searches for a new battlefield where the attacker's advantage is weaker. So the next war may not look like the last one. It may begin with fewer aircraft, fewer visible explosions, more cyber operations, more economic pressure, more proxy warfare, more attacks on logistics, more deception, more uncertainty. The battlefield may become harder to see precisely because the first strike made conventional defenses more vulnerable. And that brings us back to the mountain. The mountain was supposed to be the shield. The buffet turned it into a target. But the most important lesson may be that no military advantage survives unchanged. Every weapon creates a countermeasure. Every fortress creates a new method of attack. Every successful operation teaches the enemy how to prepare for the next one. The question is no longer whether the United States can destroy a deeply buried target. The real question is whether destroying the target can permanently change the strategic behavior that created it. Because if the answer is no, then the future of warfare may not be about building. It may be about building a system that can survive after the bunker is gone. And that is the question the world is now watching. Do you believe future wars will be decided by the side with the most powerful weapons, or by the side that can adapt fastest after those weapons change the battlefield?